Now, one of Carney's recent former roles was as governor of the Bank of England. And we asked people in the UK what they think of his political future.
How he managed his role here, the Bank of England, it's a different role, isn't it? It's very political, rather than a economic type of background. So it'll be very interesting, very different from Trump as in the way that he works.
I mean, he's probably got experience of political turmoil, so yeah, it's not like venturing into the unknown, so to speak, I'd say. So yeah, time will tell, I guess.
Now, remember that Carney was the first non-Briton to lead the Bank of England. He was brought on board in 2013 by the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. He handpicked Carney for the role. Now, Carney is known in the United Kingdom for helping to rebuild its economy and for helping to steer it through the financial turmoil of Brexit. And we've got George Osborne with us now, joining us from London. Mr. Osborne, thank you for making time for us today.
Oh, it's great to be on the show, and it's obviously an exciting day for Canada and for Mark Carney.
A huge day for him, certainly, and certainly for this country as well. So, Mr. Osborne, let me ask you, of all the financial geniuses, of all the bankers and economists in the world, what did you see in Mark Carney that made you say, yeah, that non-British dude should take on this very important job?
Yeah, well, this was, just over 10 years ago, and we were looking for a new governor of the Bank of England, the same job as governor of the Bank of Canada, just over here in London. And I'd already come across Mark in various international meetings in the IMF and the G7 and the G20, all the things that you've just been reporting on in your headlines. And, I just got to know him and thought, this guy is really smart and, he's an original thinker. And wouldn't it be great to have him? And then, of course, the big question was, well, hold on, he's Canadian, not British. Could we possibly have a governor of the Bank of England who wasn't, from our country? And I took the judgment, yeah, let's get the best. And let me see if I can persuade Mark. And that started a process that took many months of trying to persuade Mark to, up sticks from Ottawa, give up the job at the Bank of Canada, which of course he was anyway coming to the end of, move his family for a period to London. But, I'm so thrilled he said yes, and Britain was better off for it.
Tell me about the sales pitch. How did you manage to convince him?
Well, it all started actually in Mexico City, as it happens. We were at some international conference, and we were in a Japanese restaurant, so it's all a bit kind of curious. And I said I wanted to speak to him privately. I don't know what he was expecting me to ask, but he was certainly somewhat flabbergasted when I said, I'd like you to be governor of the Bank of England. And, we had a long conversation about whether someone who wasn't British could do it. And I was, convinced that he could. And I was an elected politician. I felt I had a good feel for what Britain would accept. And then, obviously it was a big family decision for the Carneys as well. I do remember I told the late Queen Elizabeth, and very few people knew. It was a top secret in Britain that we were thinking of this. And the late Queen Elizabeth, she was absolutely thrilled. And, the fact that someone was moving from Canada to Britain, she felt like, that was all keeping it within the family. So I remember that conversation with her.
So aside from his economic acumen, his ability to steer both Canada and the UK through some very difficult economic times, what did you see in him in terms of leadership and this potential entrance into elected office?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, I've just been hearing from your, the vox pops there of some of my fellow citizens. Of course, being a central bank governor is really different from being a prime minister. But, in the end, the job involves two things. It involves getting the policy right. Whether you're the prime minister or the bank governor, you've got to get the economic policy right. And, Mark got that right for Britain at that time, and he's got a ton of experience and knowledge, and I'd argue he's probably the most experienced Canadian in the world at fixing economic problems. And then you've got to be able to communicate it, even if you're the central bank governor. And there was an absolutely critical moment. He was in the Bank of England for many years, but there was the morning after the Brexit vote, which was an unexpected vote. People weren't expecting it. The markets weren't expecting it. There was lots of turmoil in the markets. And really the very first person that, an anxious British public heard from was Mark Carney. That was a deliberate decision of myself and the then British Prime Minister. We wanted Mark to be there to reassure the public. He went on television at about this time in the morning in the UK, just as people were waking up. And he was very reassuring. And, you just felt like there is, a grown-up in charge. It's unsettling. These are difficult times, but we've got someone who has a plan to get us through it. And I can't help thinking there are quite a lot of parallels with what's going on at the moment, not just for Canada, but for us in Britain and the rest of the world.
Well, you hit the nail on the head because you mentioned a lot of anxious British public. There's a lot of anxiety here in Canada right now. There's excitement and interest in most factions about the possibility of a new government, possibly renewed relations with the White House, and sort of cooling the temperature in what is increasingly a very tumultuous relationship, specifically with President Trump's administration. But as you say, Carney may have these incredible skills as a banker, makes shrewd decisions, is a good communicator, but being a political animal, as you well know, sir, as elected to your office, it's a different type of animal. And is he equipped enough? I mean, he's gone directly to the top job. It's not like he's had years serving as a member of parliament or even running campaigns to know what it's like to knock on doors, to speak at lots of rallies. Are you worried at all about his capabilities?
No, I'm not, because I think he's very smart. And I think the most important thing for Canada, if you don't mind me saying, because it's also true for Britain, is that you have someone representing your country who is not intimidated by Donald Trump, who wouldn't, when they walked into the Oval Office in Washington, think, oh my God, it's the first time I've been here. How am I going to handle this meeting? You want someone who is self-confident, who has seen it before, who is internationally experienced, internationally networked, and who's got the right ideas. And yes, the communication, the town hall rallies that you're talking about, that's a really important part of politics. But you don't want to put the cart before the horse. You've got to get the policy right. You've got to get the way you represent your country right. And I mean, in this really difficult time, I would think Canada would want its most experienced, most capable international statesman out there batting for it. And clearly that's what Mark's party thought by giving him that big endorsement a few days ago. And now, I don't know when, of course, the election's going to be, but it may be very soon in Canada. Canadian voters are going to have to decide, do we want to send our top batter up to the plate at a moment like this?
Let me just ask you one more question very quickly, Mr. Osborne, which is, I'd love to believe that Mark Carney is watching us today and maybe he's seeing you on screen. So any words of advice for him today, and maybe even for the rest of us as we launch forward into this new Canadian chapter?
Well, look, it's really uncertain times, but I hope he enjoys today. The moment of becoming Prime Minister of your country is one of, which you should take enormous pride in. Obviously, the work starts or has already started. And, he wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't a really difficult moment. But I think in the end, the people I've seen in politics, whether they're American presidents, British prime ministers, Canadian prime ministers, who succeed are the people who are true to themselves, who don't try to be something they're not, who don't be phony to themselves. And I think, Mark will stick to what he is, which is a very serious person for very serious times.
George
But
Osborne.
he has got a wicked sense. By the way, he has got a wicked sense of humor. If you get him in private.
We've been playing clips of him from The Daily Show. I mean, he's sharp. Yeah. He's very sharp. And we need to laugh right now. So, Mr. Osborne, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.